This episode of Amplified Oklahoma is brought to you by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the Oklahoma State University Library. The Edmon Low Library. It's arguably one of the most iconic buildings on campus. Standing tall and stately at the head of Library Lawn, it's a silhouette everyone on the OSU campus is familiar with. It's also one of the few places on campus that almost every student has spent time in, despite their major. Whether cramming for exams, meeting for group projects, or even going to work, it's a central part of the college experience for OSU students. This year, 2023, marks the 70th anniversary of this beloved building. But the Edmon Low hasn't always been the way it is today, nor was it the first library on campus. This month, we'll explore the history of the many libraries of Oklahoma State University, from the various buildings that have housed the library holdings over the years, to the building and opening of the Edmon Low Library we know and love today. We'll also hear from the Manager of Communication Services for the OSU Libraries, Bonnie Cain-Wood, as she talks about how the library and communication services have changed over the years, and how they're celebrating the Edmon Low Library's 70th anniversary. I'm Bethany Marino, and that's all today on Amplified Oklahoma. When OSU was first established in December of 1890, there wasn't an official campus library. Instead, the collection was housed in various homes and offices of faculty members. In 1894, the first OSU library was established in Old Central. Though we know the library today as a massive building at the center of campus, at that time, the library shared a single room with the English department. Over the years, the collection outgrew its space in Old Central. So in 1901, the library moved to a new building that eventually became known as Williams Hall. Sometimes called the Castle of the Prairie, the move to the multi-turreted building meant the library now had over 5 times more space to store materials. Additionally, Williams Hall was one of the first buildings on campus with electricity, so students were able to study at night. Though the building was impressive looking from the outside, the inside has some less than impressive architectural quirks. Richard Dermer, a 1962 graduate of OSU and founder of Hideaway Pizza, tells of the flaws of Williams Hall.
Williams Hall was the castle due east of Old Central, and that was the English department when I was an English major, so I had tons of classes in that drafty old place. It was, I want to say, a mausoleum. It was really an ancient, creaky old building, and the fire trap, like you wouldn't believe. It had a hollow interior. It was built like a square donut with an open air courtyard in the middle, surrounded by buildings that opened to the sky at the top. It was 40 or 50 feet from the campus fire station, and friends in the fire department told me that if it ever caught fire, they couldn't put it out. They didn't. It was built like a chimney, and if it ever caught fire, it would go up in a twinkling, and they didn't have enough water pressure to be able to think about putting it out. As a lot of people were sad when it was torn down because it was such an unusual looking structure, but believe me, it was not a very well planned structure.
As time passed, OSU's library holdings continued to grow. By 1920, plans had begun for a building that would be solely devoted to housing library materials. Never known by a name other than the library building, the new structure was completed in 1921. Located just 50 yards west of Old Central, near where the ConocoPhillips Alumni Center stands today, the library building housed OSU's collection for over 30 years. Martha Reed, a 1944 graduate of OSU and daughter of artist and OSU professor Dowell Reed, was a student employee at the library, and she tells of her experience numbering and fixing up the books by hand.
Well, I worked downstairs where the new books came in, and I'd print the numbers on the outside, and I learned all about the system. I guess they don't use that system now, do they?
It just changed just a little bit. We still number the books.
But, and then it was up to me to, anything that had a torn page I had to fix, you know, and they used tape that you had to wet it. It was really made out of like rice paper from Japan. They didn't use anything like 3M because, you know, it eats through the paper. So I'd fix up all the books and then I'd put the numbers on them so they would be right. And then I worked upstairs at different times, and I didn't go and get the books that somebody wanted, you know. I just loved it because I was brought up on books, and I just love libraries till this day.
After some time, however, the amount of library materials owned by OSU began to outgrow its space once again. In addition to the library building, some of the library collection had to be housed in structures called Quonset huts, a type of temporary steel structure manufactured during World War II. 1953 graduate Norma Crane talks about the frustration of going to multiple buildings to find the book she needed.
And the library, which is, you know, this gorgeous library over here, opened my senior year. For the 3 years before then, all the library books were scattered all over the campus in like 15 to 17 different libraries. So if you had a class in journalism and you had to do some research on something, they would say go to library number 10 and library number 14 to find out this information. So, you know, it was terrible. That was awful. I was so glad to see that library open.
The library of the 20s, 30s, and 40s was definitely not the large, well-established structure we know it today. What OSU really needed was a library building large enough to house their constantly growing collection. Enter Henry Bennett and his 25-year plan. As discussed in our Henry Bennett episode, President Bennett developed a plan for architectural development on OSU's campus that centered around a new library. They broke ground for what is now the Edmon Low Library on May 28, 1950. With Henry Bennett acting as Master of Ceremonies, and attendees including Chairman of the Board of Regents, an alumnus from the first ever graduating class, and head of OSU Libraries Edmon Low, construction on the new library was officially underway. The plan for the new library was ambitious. The new building project was set to cost $3 million, which is equivalent to about $36 million today. The library would be able to hold over 1 million volumes and up to 2,500 readers. Additionally, the building would be more than 8 times larger than the library building in use at the time. The project drew attention from faculty, Stillwater residents, and current OSU students. James Lovell, a 1956 graduate of OSU, remembers the awe he felt at seeing the construction progress when he took summer classes on campus.
In the first summer, they were building the OSU Library.
We need to ask about that, so good.
And I was just marveled at it. I'd never seen anything like it. They had what were the equivalency of just little wheelbarrows, but instead of them having handles, they were motorized. And they contained just about as much cement as a wheelbarrow would occur. You're building a big building, and the cement truck would come to the north side of the road just behind the library, and they would be lined up 20 plus little motorized units. The first floor had already been paved without any big fanfare. But then they had wooden boards, probably 2-inch by 16 or 18 inches, and 2 of them, so that the motorized concrete wagon could put up this as you went to the second floor. It was the days before what we have today, where you have these big long cranes that would go up 3 and 4 floors and just pump it in there. And they would go up like the entire width of the building. These planks were put up. And then they would have a circle and it'd come back up and weave back and forth to the second floor. Then when we went to the third floor, it went more. And all summer long, every day, even the noise, you just couldn't keep it all out. So it just became, each time you met 3 days a week, well, you saw the progress that we made all summer. And I thought, my goodness, what a modern invention we were seeing. Nothing like it in the world. Motorized concrete wagons. And we thought, boy, this place is high tech. And then they put the water fountain in front and it bubbled and all that.
While spectators watched the library go up, there was a lot of work being done behind the scenes. Edmon Low, the head librarian at the time and the namesake for today's building, had to make a variety of decisions regarding specific library features. Many of the aspects of the library we take for granted today were a big deal in the 1950s. For example, the library was one of only a handful of buildings on campus at the time that had air conditioning. Another feature that Edmon Low was particularly adamant about was having open stacks in the library, so all could easily access resources right off the shelf, instead of having to ask a librarian to retrieve them, even though it was extremely uncommon at the time for such a large library. The lighting of the library was also an important issue for Low. Frances Finch, a 1952 graduate of OSU and daughter of Edmon Low, remembers her father's commitment to having good lighting so students could have better studying conditions.
I remember the lighting system was a big concern. He made a trip to General Electric, the big General Electric showroom in Cleveland, I think, again in the 40s while it was still being planned. And the egg crate ceiling with the lights, and having fluorescent lights. I do remember one of the things he mentioned after that visit. She thought gave a really nice light to the tables. That somebody said they thought if you did that for the whole building, the cost of the bulbs would be very high because they do burn out and you'd have to replace them. There'd be a lot of them. I've forgotten how many miles there is. In fact, with the big air conditioning system for the whole building, it turned out that they didn't have to replace them nearly as often because the air conditioning was efficient enough to keep them cool. And so it didn't cost what they predicted it might. But he was determined he was going to have that lighting because he said, in a library you need light on your tables.
The new building was open to all on January 28, 1953, 70 years ago this year. Though impressive, it was still distant from the Edmon Low we know today. Besides not having the 1968 structural addition to the north side, the Edmon Low of the 50s and 60s had different policies. For example, rather than having specific floors designated for group study, the whole building was expected to be quiet. There was even a dress code. Billy Fisher, the first female realtor in Stillwater, attended OSU in the 1960s. She tells of getting around the restrictions on what girls could wear into the library.
Well, in the early 60s, dresses got very, very, very short. I mean, very short. And that's when so many young women started wearing slacks. And but my daddy didn't ever want me to wear overalls or anything like that. He said, I want my little girl to look like a little girl. So I've never worn them, except once in a while. But this time I was going into the library to look up something about real estate or land or something like that. And as a student there at the door, south door, said, sorry, you can't go in. I said, why? He said, you've got on trousers, and we don't allow women wearing trousers in the library. I said, oh, you're kidding. No, you cannot go in. So I said, all right. I turned around, went around back to my car and rolled up those trouser legs, put my coat back on, walked back around, and he couldn't see him and he didn't dare say anything. And I walked right in the library and found out what I needed to find out.
Ultimately, the careful planning and care taken by people like Henry Bennett and Edmon Low to create a library worthy of the OSU campus has paid off, as the Edmon Low Library has been OSU's longest-lasting library. This library has not only been useful for students in the 1950s and 60s, but has served generations of students throughout the years up to its now 70th anniversary, growing and adapting to changing needs to better serve the OSU community. Over the last 70 years, the Edmon Low Library has been an important place, not just for OSU students, but also for library faculty. Bonnie Cain-Wood, OSU professor and manager of communication services for the OSU Libraries, has been working for the library ever since being hired as a student assistant when she was a freshman at OSU. She discusses how both the library and communication services has changed over the years, and current plans to celebrate the library's big birthday.
So moving more and more, we moved away from the physical card catalog to a virtual computer-based catalog. I was here as we started really shifting from getting a lot of our materials in print to getting more and more of our materials electronically. We went from that electronically, meaning like stacks of CDs, to actual like online subscriptions that we access through the internet. We've really changed the building and shifted our focus from being a place that stores materials to being a place where people gather and meet, and where we have events and galleries where people can be inspired and really engage intellectually, and thinking about the library more as a gathering place and a sense of place and a community center is something that's really different. When I first started leading our communications office, it was a team of one. It was just me. We did almost everything in paper. We were printing 2 newsletters a year. We were sending out a press release a week. There was no social media, maybe just a handful of events every year. And today we have a team of 10 in our communications office. We have a comprehensive multimedia production unit. We're very active on social media. E-newsletters have replaced all of those print newsletters. And so me and my full-time and my team of interns have really grown what it means to be the library communications services. So just the fact that we're honoring the 70th anniversary in this way really was Dean Sheila Johnson's idea. She, of course, knew that this was coming up, and so she really wanted to do something to mark the 70th anniversary. So that was kind of how it started. We've been planning this for, it seems like a couple years now, so it's very exciting that we have officially kicked off the 70th anniversary. It is here. Throughout the year, we'll be recognizing what I am calling our 70 milestones. So we have 70 of our most popular services. We have 70 pieces of artwork on public display in the building. We're going to have 70 book recommendations from library employees. So throughout the year, we're going to be sprinkling in these different 70s that we can celebrate. And the 70th anniversary is a great time for us to look back on the history of the library, but it is also a wonderful opportunity for us to look ahead. And so a big part of the 70th anniversary celebration is really a fundraising campaign and looking at different opportunities to secure private donations to help us build those services and facilities and resources that are going to carry us into the next 70 years.
OSU's library has experienced many transformations throughout our school's history, from temporary buildings to the opening of Edmon Low Library and branch libraries all across campus. The Edmon Low has also changed over the years. Today, it is a place where students can not only check out books or do homework, but also meet with friends in study rooms, buy coffee, check out equipment, receive tutoring, and so much more. Despite the changes over the years, the one constant has been the countless memories made here by students, faculty, and community members alike. As we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Edmon Low Library, we remember that while there may be many more changes to come, it will always hold a special place for everyone that passes through its doors. Richard Dermer was interviewed by Latasha Wilson. Francis Finch, James Lovell, and Martha Reed were interviewed by Tanya Fincham. Billy Fisher and Norma Crane were interviewed by Juliana Nicolasian. All interviews are from the oral history collection titled O State Stories. Special thanks to Bonnie Cain-Wood. Music in this episode included calm, expressive piano, feeling full of joy piano solo, peaceful, positive, romantic, and stylish background classical waltz piano by Music L Files. All pieces are licensed under Creative Commons 4.0. We'd love to hear what you think. If you have suggestions or comments, connect with us on Twitter at OOHRP. You can also find the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program online at www.library.okstate.edu/oral history. If you liked the show, there are 2 other great podcasts that the OSU Library produces, Dear Oklahoma and Flat, Cool, and Acid Free, which can be found at library.okstate.edu/news/podcast. I'm Bethany Marino, and we'll see you next month on Amplified Oklahoma.